So anything you say can be used against you because it will be recorded. And let's have a visual. Everybody see that? Chapter 7 slide. Can anybody, someone see it? Say yes. Okay. What is so wonderful? You know what? How's that? Can you see me now? That helps. Of course, you might have liked it better the other way. I don't know. What is great about being an American and being in a government, again, we're not full-blown democracy, but we do have elements of democracy. We are a democratic republic. We're a constitutional republic. What is great about being an American and being in this country with our form of government is we can participate at a level that before the founding of our country, very few people could participate in throughout history when it comes to their government. That's what this chapter is about, is citizen or voter participation in a democracy, and in our case, a democratic republic. Now, obviously, probably the primary way of participating that we think of when we think of being active in politics is voting. But there are many other ways that we as Americans can participate in the government of not just our nation, but our state, and as well as our own little communities, even on the county level, because we have to elect county commissioners. We can be involved in more ways than just voting. You can see here that we can campaign, and we can either campaign for ourselves if we're running for office, because that's another wonderful aspect of our form of government. We can all run for a government position. Of course, we have to be a certain age. We cannot run if we have a criminal record. I mean, there are a few restrictions, but no longer do you have to just be a white male property owner to be able to run for office. So you can campaign for yourself, or you could campaign for maybe a good friend of yours is running for office. I have family members who have done that in the past. They've painted big signs and put them up throughout the county for their candidate. You can contact public officials, and I'll try to remember and try to dig it up over the weekend. But I've got a letter from President Clinton when he was president. I had wrote him about an issue and got a response from him about 3 months later, but I got one. And I think my son has one too. It might be easier to find his. He's got one from President Obama. But you can contact your public officials, and today it's a lot easier with email. You can go to the Oklahoma government website. You can look up your state rep, Markwayne Mullin, and you could email him within the next minute an issue or concern that you have. You can join or you can support an interest group. The NRA, the National Rifle Association, is a well-known interest group. Teacher interest groups, all kinds of interest groups that you can either support financially and join them and get all of their newsletters and updates, even go to their rallies. Unconventional political acts, things that you don't see very often. Trying to think of what a good example of that would be, because I'm not talking about illegal. Maybe going to a Trump rally, like there was one a couple of months ago in Tulsa. Going to a national convention, Democratic National Convention or Republican National Convention. Those are pretty unconventional because they only happen once every 4 years. Lots of ways to participate in our government. So here's a little flow chart of the history of voting rights in the USA. And these follow the section in your textbook, starting on page 190. Starting on the bottom of page 190. And going through well, I guess it's just that first section of 190 through about 194. But originally, when after the Constitution was ratified, the Constitution left it up to the states to determine time, place, and manner, it says at the bottom of page 190, of holding elections. Now, who would like to venture to guess who were the eligible voters at that time? Everybody? Male, female, above the age of 18? I think somebody was talking, but it was all garbled. One more time, sorry.
or just like
Is that somebody in our class? Can anybody else hear that?
if it was all white males that would win, or just all males.
All right, I heard white men in there, I think, and that's correct. Only white men with property could vote at first. And there's a great quote by Benjamin Franklin at the top of page 191 that because Benjamin Franklin thought that was ridiculous. And he made a quote observing that if a man whose only item of property was a donkey, I won't use the word that the textbook has, that man would lose his right to vote if the donkey died. And so Franklin's quote is this: "Now tell me, which was the voter, the man or the donkey?" Which brings me to a commercial. Would you like some light reading from the early colonial period? Then you'll want to get this book with Benjamin Franklin's writings, which that title, Fart Proudly, is in one of his writings. So, Writings of Benjamin Franklin You Never Read in School, edited by Carl Japicsi. So get you a copy of that from Amazon and enjoy some good early 18th century, early 19th century humor. All right, back to the flow chart. So that went on for about 50 years. Actually, almost looks like 80 years. And then with the passing of the 15th Amendment in 1870, this banned states from keeping people of other races from voting. Now again, that's in theory. But here's what the 15th Amendment says. Well, let me see if I have it first. Yeah, there we go. The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. In other words, former slaves. Now, if you've had American history after the Civil War, you know that Jim Crow laws were put into effect to basically deter African Americans from voting in the South. But in theory, the 15th Amendment was passed so that all races in America could vote. Well, it wasn't another 50 years. It was another 50 years before there was another piece of legislation or an amendment of significance. And this banned the denial of the right to vote to women. Women could not vote before 1920, except for in 2 states. I think it was Wyoming and I can't remember. I think it's in your textbook though. But this amendment was added. Let's see if I have it. Yay. But I don't have the actual amendment. Let me read that to you. The right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of sex. Congress shall have power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. So, ladies in the class, this is the centennial year, 2020, of when women received the right to vote. This happened because there were women who, known as suffragettes, who protested and campaigned for the rights of women to vote as well. And the word suffragette comes from suffrage, which means to vote. So the battle for women's suffrage, the battle for women's rights to vote, was also going on at the same time in England as in the United States. Well, then we had a couple of more. We had the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which basically said this cannot be denied, remember, to minorities. Basically doing away with the Jim Crow laws in the South. The 24th Amendment, well, I guess I'm going backwards. I should have went here to the 23rd Amendment. Citizens of the District of Columbia also had the right to vote for president. That is DC, Washington, DC, District of Columbia. The District of Columbia is a separate body that is, of course, the district where our capital is, Washington, and that area was land that was donated by a couple of states. But you have people living there who aren't necessarily politicians, so this gave them the right to vote. Then in '64, the 24th Amendment, which eliminated a tax that kept certain people from voting. It says the right of citizens of the United States to vote in any primary or other election for president or vice president, for electors for president or vice president, or for senator or representatives in Congress shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state by reason of failure to pay any poll tax or other taxes. Then the Voting Acts right of 65, and then in 71, the 26th Amendment gave the right to vote for 18-year-olds and up. Before that, you had to be 21, but the arguments for changing this and adding the 26th Amendment was because it happened during the Vietnam War and after all of the war action in the 60s. If we can send 18-year-olds off to fight wars, if we can say that we can draft 18-year-olds, then they are also old enough to vote. So that amendment said the right of citizens of the United States who are 18 years of age or older to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of age. So notice 1870, all races in theory can vote, males. 50 years later, women can also vote. And then approximately 50 to 51 years later, all citizens 18 years and older. So we're in 2020, 49 years since the 26th Amendment. Will we see a new amendment added this year or next year concerning voting? Who knows, but I have heard some talk or some statements that one party would like to lower the voting age to 16. And while I haven't heard that from the party itself, the people that were speculating about this were on the opposite end of political ideology. And they were speculating that the reason they want to lower the voting age is to get these millennials who would vote their way. Now, again, I think that was speculation, but I ask that only because it's been 50 years since this amendment, almost. Incidentally, would you like to know another event that happened in 71? Your ruggedly handsome and very charismatic instructor in American government was born in 1971. I know I look like I'm only about 30, but I'm about to turn 49 this month. Not that that's anything important, but you can see that I'm getting to be historical in a sense. A legend in my own mind. All right. Any questions on that little flow chart about the history of voting rights? There is a big debate right now in our country about, with the coronavirus, about how to vote in a couple of months. Democrats want everybody to vote with a mail-in vote. Because of the virus, they say, let's not have polling places where people will be exposed to each other. And if you're not familiar with this, President Trump and the Republicans, but especially President Trump, is saying if this happens, it will be a rigged election. Trump wants people to go to the polls to vote. Anyway, this little cartoon illustrates a sad reality in our country when election day does come, you'll see more people not voting than exercising their right. Now, in the presidential elections, usually we have, I think, in the 40 percentile of registered voters vote, or I should say eligible voters. But in the midterm elections, like coming up in 2 years in 2022, which will be, some of you mentioned your first time to vote will be 2024, but actually, if you're 18 in 2022, you'll be able to vote in the midterm elections, which means our voting for our representatives, our senators. I think that'll be our time to vote for governor in Oklahoma. But anyway, usually national voting statistics are lower in the midterm elections years. I think it goes into the 30 percentile than it is for the presidential election years, which is in the 40s. I am going to venture to say that this, I'm gonna make a prediction, and you can write it down and see if Instructor Bings is a good prognosticator. I'm going to say that the election in this November will be the highest voter turnout for a presidential election in many, many years. I'm going to say probably the highest since 1960 with President Kennedy versus President Nixon, or he wasn't president yet, but Kennedy versus Nixon. The reason there was a high voter turnout then was because Kennedy was Catholic, and a lot of Protestant Americans were afraid that if he was elected president, he would basically do what the Pope says. So there was a big voter turnout in the 60 election. But anyway, I'm going to predict that this will be one of our highest voter turnouts for president in a long time. Well, looky here. I should have looked at my graph before I said that. Here is the turnout for presidential elections since 1980. Anybody want to venture to say who we elected in 1980? Any presidential trivia buffs? President Ronald Reagan took his first term in 1980. But here is the voter turnout. But this is with same-day registration. And this is states that allow you to register the date or the day of the election versus states that say you've got to register before election day. States that allow people to register on the same day have a much higher turnout than states that say, nope, you got to be registered before election day. And you'll notice that it's a good 10 points higher. I'm not sure. I don't think you can register on the day of the election in Oklahoma. I'm pretty sure you have to be registered before. What is election day this year? The first Thursday in November is Looks like November 5th. First Tuesday, November 3rd. So if you're 18 and you're planning on voting on November 3rd, you've got to register here in Oklahoma before November 3rd. Why should you register? Well, there is a lot of discussion today about there is voter fraud. And if you don't register to vote, but yet somehow you might get a piece of mail from the winner. Let's say President Trump gets reelected and he sends you a letter or an email saying, "Thank you for voting for me." And you're like, "Wait a second, I never registered. I didn't vote." Well, we want to prevent voter fraud. We want to make sure that someone who wants to vote is meeting their requirements. Again, if you have a criminal record, you cannot vote. I believe you lose that right. And then it just helps to maintain statistics. It helps people who run and people who do polls to kind of identify trends. Which, if we learned anything in 2016, is that polls really don't mean anything right now, because virtually every poll said Hillary was going to win. Here are some regulations about voter registrations. Except for North Dakota, all states have some kind of registration laws on the books when it comes to voting. Now, some states, like I said, some states you can go and vote on the same, see, you can go register right before you vote on the same day. Many states say, no, you got to register before. And some of those states require that it's got to be at least 30 days before the election. And I'm wanting to say that that is Oklahoma too. So 30 days before our election, I believe would be October 4th. Maybe October 5th, since there's 31 days in October. So if you haven't registered yet and you're 18, you might check into that. You might only have about 2 weeks left to register. You no longer have to go to your county office to register to vote. So let me see, we got Arkoma and Howe. You two, your county seat is Poteau, correct? So you don't have to go all the way to Poteau to the county office to register. You can pick up a registration form at the post office in your town. I think Howe still has a post office, right? You might be able to register online. Vianne, your county seat, who is that? Is that Muskogee, or what county are you in?
Sequoia?
So is that Sallisaw?
Yeah, basically.
So yeah, you don't have to go to Sallisaw to register to vote. If you guys do, when you graduate high school in a year or two, if you go to college, let's say some of you go to OU in Norman, and you want to vote, you can still vote absentee ballot in, let's say some of you from Vian go there. You can still do an absentee ballot in Sequoyah County, or you can choose to register in the county that Norman is in. I'm not sure what county that is. Our son is a student at OSU in Stillwater, but he still votes through absentee ballot here in Pittsburgh County instead of registering in Payne County. But the big message, the overall message is register to vote. If you're 18 and older, you have this wonderful privilege. So don't squander it. If you do register and then you go vote, you have to have a photo ID. So if for some reason you're 18 and you have not gotten a driver's permit or license yet, which I'm seeing more students in our community do that, you can still get a personal ID through the state of Oklahoma, which I think you have to get at 16 if you want to take the ACT. Is that correct? I think our kids had to do that. Did any of you have to do that if you took the ACT? Bueller, anybody out there? None of you have taken the ACT yet?
Okay, well, you do have to have ID, but I don't think you have to have like your permit. You can go to the school and they can print off like something that gives you like your ID to get you.
Okay. But anyway, get a photo ID to show when you go to vote. Now, if we go to page, I'll tell you what, we're gonna stop early, even though it's just 5 minutes. We're gonna stop there, and then we'll come back Monday and tackle why voter turnout in America is one of the lower percentages of countries that have democracies. So we'll stop there and I'll give you a chance if there are any questions.
On our briefs, are we allowed to use information from other websites?
You are. I think I put in this would carry over from the module 1. There was a little section about what is a brief. And I think I mentioned there that if you do use outside sources, just put an in-text citation. You don't have to have a reference page.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yep. Oh, who's that? You wanted to know when my birthday was so you could send a card? I'm just kidding. Like I said, my birthday's in September, but the date, the 24th, is not important. So anyway, no other questions? And I do love dark chocolate. But anyway, I would never try to bribe you. All right, have a great weekend.
Have a good weekend.
If you got an extra 2 hours, you might check out Dead Poets Society with Robin Williams. So I've stopped